First, why the days of seeing your GP for free are numbered. Medical practices that for years have bulk billed are now being forced to charge patients.
It comes as Federal Health Minister Mark Butler acknowledged the state of the system, saying primary care is in its worst shape since Medicare began.
Doctors say the cost of providing health care is growing as the government pushes for more GPs to offer free care to patients. A new report shows only 12% of GPs bulk bill all of their patients. Our health editor Jennifer Beshwadi has the details.
That residents in our eastern suburbs and our northern beaches are forking out over $50 every single time they pay a trip to the GP.
If you are in your 50s or 60s with no concession card, the free doctor is not the one you were promised. You were told to bring your Medicare card, not your credit card. Then you rang around, and the clinic that used to bulk bill you now wants $50 a visit, and the longer appointment your heart needs is the one they still charge for. The comeback was built to skip you. Listen to a woman who found out the way most of us do.
When I went to go leave, they told me that there was a cost, and I was quite shocked.
With appointments now costing up to $80.
Really?
She says her son's fortnightly visits add more pressure to the family budget.
It has been hard just because, groceries have even gone up, the price of living.
$80 for a routine visit, on top of groceries that already climb every week. That is not a story about one clinic. It is the story the whole country was living in until late last year. And it is the story the government promised to end. To understand why the promise does not reach you, you have to see how bad it had become. For roughly 10 years, the amount Medicare paid a doctor for your visit was frozen, while the cost of running a clinic kept rising. The Medical Association puts the monies stripped out over that freeze at about $8.3 billion. Doctors covered the shortfall themselves for as long as they could, and then they stopped. Here is how a GP describes the moment the sums stopped working.
He says the Medicare indexation freeze on the amount the government reimburses appointments means his practice is struggling to break even.
I think if there's no increase, like every other area, if there's no supplemented income, it's just going to be passed on to the patients, which means those patients probably won't be able to afford it. And that just means, unfortunately, more strain on the hospital system.
That last line is the whole danger. When the visit costs too much, people do not find the money. They put the visit off. More than 1 million Australians were already delaying a doctor over cost before this crisis even peaked. And the ones who wait are rarely the young and well. They are people managing a heart, a lung, a slow thing that gets worse in the dark. By the time the Medical Association was speaking, it was not talking about inconvenience. It was talking about collapse. Hear how its president framed where the whole system had arrived.
A decade now, various governments have gradually reduced the rebates that are available to patients if they see a GP or to doctors if they bulk bill a patient, and it has reached crisis point. And we're very concerned that if action isn't taken by the end of this year, the system that allows Australians to see their GPs is going to be on the point of collapse.
So the government acted, and the rescue was enormous. $8.5 billion, the single largest injection into Medicare since it was created, sold as an extra 18 million free visits a year, and a promise that 9 in 10 trips to the doctor would be free by 2030. From the 1st of November 2025, the payment that used to reward a clinic only for bulk billing a pensioner or a child was widened to cover everyone, with a bonus on top for any practice that bulk bills every patient who walks in. And here is where you might switch off, because it sounds like good news that has already fixed your problem. So let me point it at you directly. That widened payment mostly rewards the short, standard visit, the 6 to 19-minute appointment a healthy person needs once a year. It is not built around the long consultation that a 58-year-old with diabetes and a dodgy knee actually books. The rescue was real. It just walked straight past the kind of visit you are aging into needing. You can see the gap between the promise and your street in the numbers that followed. When an independent directory rang more than 6,000 clinics after the change, the share that fully bulk bill an ordinary adult had jumped from about 21% to about 40% in a year. That is a genuine lift. It also means that 6 clinics in every 10 still send you home with a bill. Listen to how uneven it looks on the ground.
13.2% of GPs bulk bill, leaving an average $56.25 out-of-pocket gap between the doctor's fee and the Medicare rebate. In the Warringah electorate, covering from Neutral Bay to Manly, Curl and Frenchs Forest, just 12% of GPs bulk bill.
Whether the doctor is free now depends on where you happen to live. In New South Wales, about half of clinics fully bulk bill an adult. In Western Australia, it is closer to 1 in 5. And in the national capital, it is barely 1 in 10. Same Medicare card, same country, completely different answer at the front desk, depending on your suburb. And where the free visit did not arrive, the price of the visit that stayed private did not hold still. At the clinics that still charge you, the out-of-pocket cost of a standard appointment rose from about $43 to about $49 in a single year, a jump of 13.5%. Strip out the clinics that switched to free and look only at the ones that stayed private, and the gap still climbed almost 7%, faster than the year before. The reward went to the practices that flipped. The bill went up for everyone who was left behind. And the highest gaps are not in the big anonymous cities. In Tasmania, the average out-of-pocket cost runs past $60. In the capital, close to $58. These are the smaller, older communities, the places where a person is most likely to be on a fixed income and least likely to have a second clinic down the road to try instead. Hear a doctor from exactly that kind of place explain what she carried before she gave up bulk billing.
Absolutely not. In the last 12 months, I personally have lost $200,000 supporting my business to try to keep it open. As a practice owner, especially in a rural environment, I've honestly just gotten to breaking point.
$200,000 out of one doctor's own pocket to keep a country practice open. When that doctor finally charges a fee, the people who feel it first are not the well. Listen to a state medical president name exactly who is exposed.
And these are really vulnerable patients, people who are older, people who have chronic diseases, people with young families who need to see their GPs. And when you take someone with a chronic illness, it is important that that patient has access to their GPs regularly, because it is their GPs that keeps them well and out of hospital.
People who are older, people with chronic disease, the exact people whose care depends on a longer, regular appointment, and the exact appointment the new payment does the least to protect. The college that represents GPs has now asked for a 40% rise in the rebate for those longer consultations, which tells you plainly that the rescue did not cover them. And the shortage of doctors underneath all of this has not gone anywhere. The announcement made it sound solved. The system underneath it is thinner than that. Fewer than half of clinics offer bulk billing across much of the country, and outside the 2 biggest cities, it drops below 1 in 3, all while there are not enough GPs to go around. Hear how that was already being described before the rescue landed.
We know this is already an issue, not just here in Queensland, but right across the country. A recent report found fewer than 50% of clinics offer bulk billing and less than 1 in 3 outside of Sydney and Melbourne. Add to this a national shortage of GPs.
So hold the good headline and the hard reality side by side, because the second half of this is where the promise comes apart. The government's own number says more than 80% of visits are now bulk billed, up from 77% the year before, the biggest jump since the pandemic. That is true. But that figure counts services, not people, and it still has not climbed back to where it sat before all of this, let alone to the 90% that was promised. A service is a single item on a Medicare form. A person is you, sitting in the car park, deciding whether a 20-minute appointment is worth the gap this fortnight. When a clinic bulk bills your quick script renewal, but charges you for the long visit where the real problem gets found, the government counts a win and you still pay. The number on the podium and the number in your bank account are measuring two different things. There is a reason the free visit reaches some Australians and not you, and it is older than this rescue. 2 decades ago, the country quietly split Medicare in two. Pensioners, concession card holders and children were handed a protected, bulk-billed lane, and everyone else was left to the doctor's discretion. When the government tripled the bulk billing payment a few years back, it restored free visits for around 11 million people already sitting in that protected lane, and for them, it worked. You were not in it. You were only added last November, at the very end, with the smallest certainty attached. The people the system was already built to shield got the comeback first. You got it last. Look at what the clinic actually receives, and the design stops being a mystery. For a standard short visit in a city, the payment to bulk bill you now lands around $65. Enough that a practice can afford to say yes. For the longer appointment, the 20 or 40 minutes a complicated body needs, the sums still do not work, which is exactly why the college that represents GPs is asking for a 40% rise on those longer items. The rescue was aimed at the cheap, quick visit that makes the national number climb. The slow, unhurried visit that actually keeps you out of hospital was left roughly where it was. Here is the part that should make you cautious about celebrating. When callers rang those clinics, some of them said the quiet part out loud. They had switched to bulk billing for everyone, but only for a 6 to 12-month trial, to see whether the new payment covered their costs. The free visit you were handed in November may quietly have an expiry date penciled in for the middle of the year. And even the improvement that is real did not land where the need is greatest. The analysts who track this found bulk billing rose most where the government payment was highest, in regional and rural zones with the largest incentives, and not where clinics have to compete for patients. In plenty of those same areas, there are fewer doctors per person than in the cities. The map of the comeback follows the money, not the sickness. The medical college has now mapped that unevenness electorate by electorate, so you can look up your own seat and see whether the free doctor actually reached your street or stopped a few suburbs short of it. And in those thin, far-flung communities, the fee is not even the whole barrier. In a submission to one state inquiry, a chronically ill country patient spelled out what the shortage really means for a body that is already tired. Too unwell to manage the long drive to the nearest bulk billing doctor at all, with no family nearby to help make them.
Trip. For that person, the free visit is not a lottery ticket that might come good. It is simply out of reach, sitting on the far side of a highway they cannot manage. And the cruelty of a skipped visit is that it saves nobody anything. It just moves the cost to the worst possible place. When people cannot afford the doctor, they wait, and then they arrive at a hospital instead. The New South Wales government's own estimate
is that every 1% drop in bulk billing pushes around 3,000 more people into emergency departments. A trip to your GP costs the health system somewhere near $40. That same problem, once it lands in an emergency ward, costs between $300 and $2,000. And by then, it is you in the bed, not you in the waiting room. The gap you refuse to pay does not vanish. It grows teeth and comes back as an admission. The government says households will save hundreds of dollars a year, some $859 million across the country by 2030. Hold that number at arm's length, because it is a national total, averaged across everyone, including the 11 million who were already covered before any of this. An average is where a single person quietly disappears. Your saving is not the national average. Your saving is whatever the clinic on your corner decides to write on your invoice next winter. And if you have listened to all of this as someone else's misfortune because you are healthy tonight, here is the part that should change how you hear it. Health does not send a warning. The 58-year-old booking longer appointments today was 52 and fine a few years ago. The official surveys already show the people most likely to skip a doctor over cost are the ones carrying a long-term condition, which is the club you join without applying the moment a test comes back wrong. The gap you are shrugging off tonight is the gap you inherit the week your body changes. None of this is an accident of the market. A generation ago, seeing a doctor was meant to be the same for everyone, and the promise made from every podium last year was that it would be again, your Medicare card and not your credit card. What was actually built is a payment that rewards the short visit, favors the practice that flips, follows the funding into some postcodes and past others, and leaves the long appointment an aging body needs sitting outside the deal. So where does it leave you? In the best case, a clinic near you is one of the 4 in 10 that flipped. It holds the change past its trial, and your quick visits genuinely cost you nothing. In the realistic case, the short visit is free, and the longer one you actually need still carries a gap that grew this year, and you learn to ration the appointments. In the worst case, you are in the wrong postcode. The practice that flipped flips back in winter, and the check you keep putting off becomes the hospital stay that a $50 visit would have prevented. This did not have to be the shape of it. The money existed. The choice was to spend it on the visit that is cheap to make free, and to leave the visit that keeps a chronically ill Australian out of hospital sitting outside the promise. The government gets to stand in front of a true-sounding number, and you get to stand at a front desk finding out the free doctor was for the short problem, not the one that keeps you up at night. That was a decision, and you are the one holding the invoice. So here is what you actually do about it. First, before you book, ring the clinic and ask one exact question. Do you bulk bill a standard consultation for an adult with no concession card, and does that still apply to a long appointment? The answer to the second half is the one that matters for you. Second, if the practice that flipped tells you it is a trial, write down when the trial ends, because the free visit you got in autumn may not be there in spring, and you want to know before you need it. Third, if you are managing anything ongoing, ask your GP to set up a chronic disease care plan while you have the relationship, because that is the paperwork that unlocks longer, better covered appointments, instead of leaving you paying the full gap each time. Fourth, if the nearest clinic charges and you are on a fixed income, ask the doctor directly to bulk bill you, because whether they do is still their discretion, and plenty will say yes to a patient who asks and would never offer it unprompted. Fifth, keep your own record of what each visit costs you across a year, because that number, not the one on the podium, is the true price of the promise you were sold, and it is the number worth taking to to the ballot box. So tell me below, when you last rang around for a doctor, what was the gap they quoted you? And did the free visit everyone is celebrating actually turn out to be there for you?